I'm Melissa Case from Hat to Hem, coming to you from our bedroom in front of our yet unfinished closet project. And today I'm going to continue showing you how I made Mina's green walking gown. This gown is inspired by one worn by Winona Ryder in the 1992 gothic horror film Bram Stoker's Dracula. The original gown was designed by Iko Ishioka, who won an Academy Award for the designs she made for this movie. So last time I took you from mock-up to about halfway through the bodice making process, and then I had to leave things on a cliffhanger. Again, sorry. So today I'm actually going to show you the rest of my footage from making the bodice. As always, if you missed a part of the series or if you're new to this and want to see a little bit more, you can always check the playlist or the description below. I did post links down there. I also have links to all the machines and any kind of supplies I may have used during this. That's also in the description. So I already did the analysis of the bodice, so today I think we should just jump right in. We left off with the discovery that the top of the lapels weren't touching like they should. I decided to add gussets to the top section of the bodice. The additions will be mostly or completely concealed by the lapels, but I'll give it just enough fabric so that the top of the lapels should be able to touch now. I picked apart the top of the seam a few inches and then pinned it to where I wanted to be on the dress form. I copied my work to the other side, and then I placed a piece of scrap fabric beneath the gap and I traced it. I cut the triangle out with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Since I was using this as my pattern and there was a definite front and back to the pieces, I knitted the front and the back directly on the muslin. After cutting out my fabric, I flatlined the fashion fabric to a piece of cotton twill, just as I did with the main bodice pieces. Then I attached it to my bodice, sewing the back edge to the bodice and the front edge to the lapel. Victory! Onto the collar. I lined my pattern up with the embroidery and cut it out on the fold along the sides and the bottom. I flipped the pattern up and cut a mirror image of the front to serve as a bit of a pseudo lining. I gave it a press and then cut out a layer of cotton twill interline to help stabilize the collar. With the lining, then the front, then the twill all stacked up on top of each other, I stitched up the sides. I clipped the corners and trimmed the edges. I pressed the stitching and turned the collar right side out and pressed it again. I gave the whole collar one more press for good measure. Then I gave the bottom edge a much needed trim to tidy things up. I started pinning the collar to the bodice, working from front to back, and that's when I realized that my collar is a little bit longer than the bodice. But a quick trip to the sewing machine helped fix that. Now back on the bodice it goes. It appears that at some point I ran the bottom of my collar through my serger. I have no memory of this, but there it is. Of course, at this point of the commission I was feeling a little delirious. Okay, getting closer now, but still have a ways to go. Time to attach the center panel. I had parts of it pinned in place while on the dress form, so it only took a little fine tuning to get it ready for the sewing machine. I stitched the waist tape to the bodice. This will hook around her waist and hopefully keep the bodice in place and firmly against her back. This was also the perfect place for my label. Now that the top of the bodice touches, it's time to make sure it stays that way. I sewed a hook and eye to the corners of the collar. This is the only hook and eye at the center front of the bodice. The rest of the closures are going to be along the side or underneath the front panel. I also pinched up the side darts now, but I won't sew them until later. First, I need to start on the sleeves. Like most of the bustle era patterns I have, these sleeves consist of 2 pieces. After cutting out the fashion fabric, I cut out the lining. I opted for a lighter cotton rather than a heavier twill. The sleeves just don't need the same level of support as the bodice, and I feel like the lighter fabrics are more comfortable for sleeves. I stitched up the inside seam of the lining and then the fashion fabric. The seams were pressed open, then I clipped the lining to the fashion fabric. I stitched the sleeve and the lining at the same time without the need to stick the lining inside the sleeve. This also helps anchor the lining so it doesn't move all over the place when I try to sew. This is an 18th century sewing technique, and I have no idea if it was used in the 19th century, but it saves me a bit of time and it was just efficient, so I'm using it. Time for the cuffs. I measured the bottom of the sleeve and used that measurement plus seam allowance for the width of the cuff. After that, it was just a matter of shaping the cuff. My embroidery is on a smaller scale than the original costume, so I opted to scale the cuffs down rather than make them the correct size with kind of like a floating embroidery in the middle. My philosophy is that it's my job to make my client look as good as I possibly can, and sometimes that means having to make some adjustments as I go along. I don't think many people on the convention floor will notice that the cuffs are a little smaller unless they have a picture they're comparing her to. However, I do think they would notice if the embroidery doesn't look like it matches the cuff. Anyway, I was able to use the first cuff as a guide for cutting out the second cuff. I also cut out 2 linings of the same fabric and twill interlining. With the embroidered piece, then the lining, then the twill, I stitched along the upper edges, pivoting at the corner. I clipped the corner and headed to my ironing board. I placed the cuff against the sleeve to check to make sure they matched up. Then I opened up the cuff and I placed the edges right sides together and stitched up the edge. After turning and pressing the cuff, I ran the raw edge through my serger as well as the raw edge of the sleeve. I stuffed the cuff inside the sleeve with the embroidery facing the lining, and then the 2 layers were stitched together and flipped up so the cuff was on the outside. Next, I ran 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of the sleeve. I gathered the top of the sleeve to fit the armhole and set it in place. While I was at my machine, I took this time to sew up the darts. It just makes things go a little faster if you can complete more than one step on the same machine. I also sewed in the lacing panel. For some unknown reason, I have no footage of creating these panels. I'm guessing I made them during a self-doubt moment. I always have a moment towards the end of a commission where I kind of start to doubt myself and my dream of doing this full time, so I get a little slacky with filming. Anyway, I made these little lacing panels to help close the bodice. They're beneath the center panel, and their purpose is to relieve the stress on the bodice enough to make closing the front panel easier. I have no idea if there was anything like this on the original costume. I just wanted to make things as easy for my client as I could. I also failed to get footage of sewing in the hooks and eyes and the snaps, but I have a clip of me fastening the bodice at the end of this video. I folded the front of the bodice to line up with the lapels. I like to finish the bottom of my bodices with bias tape, so I'm clipping it in place here. As with the overskirt, I made it up in pink in reference to the last gown I made for this client. I love nice long back pleats, but that's not what this gown calls for. So, itty bitty back pleats it is. Last trip to the sewing machine for the bodice. Whew, just hand finishing is left. I sewed the top of the bias tape to the bodice and secured the bottom of the lapels to the bottom of the bodice. I also tacked down the top of the lapels to keep them in place, and I sewed some lace to the collar and the cuffs, but Again, I didn't get footage of it. Now, finally, the bodice is done. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Pictures of the finished gown are on Instagram and Facebook, but more importantly, they're at the end of this video. I get to actually say that. But first, I wanted to make a quick announcement about 2 more videos I have before I finish the Making Mina series. Because that's right, we're not done yet. I was also commissioned to make a hat, and I recorded that process, so that video is still coming up. In case you missed it, Nikki from Liam has organized a big Secret Santa project. I'm actually really excited about it. The way it works is that multiple costumers on YouTube, as I guess also across the world, are going to be exchanging gifts this holiday season. Honestly, the list of costumers involved with this is pretty impressive. There's gonna be Bernadette Banner, Kathy Hay, Morgan Donner, Marika from Enchanted Rose Cosplay, Noelle from Costuming Drama, Zach from Pinset Tailoring, who else? Oh, Lauren and Abby from American Duchess. Honestly, the list just keeps going on, and if I try to name everybody, I'm going to forget someone. So I'm gonna stop now while I'm ahead. I'm honestly still in shock that I was invited to participate. Anyway, a video of my gifting process, as well as unboxing my Secret Santa gift, will be up soon. I also experimented with watercolors, which I've only ever done once before, unless you count art class, which I don't. So yeah, that will be new. I'm also planning on doing a roundup of all the projects I had over this year. I'm also thinking about including the projects from last year since I never actually made a video about those. But yeah, anyway, please make sure you click that subscribe button if you're interested in any of those. Make sure you like this video if you found it at all interesting, entertaining, anything. And that's it. I'll see you in 2 weeks with another video. Bye! There had to have been an easier way of closing this, right? Maybe not. Oh well, I did my best.